The member for Mildura.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. And I rise today and I often say I'll make this brief and that never happens. I'll try to keep it. A long story short has never happened ever before in my life. But there are a few things that I do want to put on the record and comment on in this bill, the Residential Tenancies and Funerals Amendment Bill. And we'll start with the residential parks is probably a good place. We do have quite a few of these in my electorate. They are mainly used for workers' accommodation. In fact, I know a lot of the corporate farms, in fact, have gone through the process of trying to get dwellings for workers' accommodation on farm, which has been very, very difficult. So in a lot of cases, putting residential caravan parks on their properties or other land that they own has been a way that they can actually do it, or disperse camping or whatever the case may be. So to have a standardised form across the industry, because a lot of these residents can be long-term, season to season, but they can also be quite transient and move around. And they can also, a lot of the big farms will have the residential parks in different regions. When you have farms or companies that own almonds in Robinvale, they own potatoes over the river, they own strawberries down near Shepparton and stone fruit through the Swan Hill Murray Valley region. To have standardised forms makes sense. So it will have probably minimal impact as far as the industry goes, and stakeholder feedback, from what I understand, has been quite positive. So this is a good thing. If we could make it a little easier for workers' accommodation to exist in the form of caravan parks, because there is a lot of, and I'll give the almond industry or the nut industry, pistachios as well, in our region, the workforce, particularly that we use, are grey nomads that come down with their caravans, but there's also obviously permanent cabins around what is effectively a residential park. But the workforce is grey nomads that spend, their winters up in North Queensland, the Northern Territory, travelling around doing all that wonderful retirement living in caravans, and then they will come and drive shakers, drive pickups and drive machinery during the summer and harvest food for things like your almond milk and your almond meal and all sorts of other things that almonds contribute to the food chain. So it is actually, it's a good thing. It is highly regulated already, so to have a standardised form and agreements is a good thing. And I also did want to touch on the amendments to the Funerals Act 2006, which have come about due to the changes in legislation in other jurisdictions. This is obviously very important in cross-border communities, as we've heard the member for Ovens Valley point out, and also the member for Morwell, having that standardisation, in cross-border communities. And I understand that it is difficult to get your head around if you've never lived in a border community, but in a lot of these places, and I'll use Mildura, Wentworth, Golgol, Baronga as an example, Robinvale, Euston as another one, infrastructure in these places is largely on the Victorian side, but the development that we're seeing is on the New South Wales side. So a lot of people will live and they'll build their forever homes on the New South Wales side, but deal with everything in Victoria. They work in Victoria, their kids are educated in Victoria, the cemetery's in Victoria. So this is a very important thing for cross-border communities to have that. To have Victoria change in order to ensure that the legislative requirements are broadly similar to New South Wales and SA. And SA is exactly the same in my electorate, in the member for Lowndes electorate. We go right over to South Australia, and when you've got people living in Victoria, Murrayville's a perfect example. It's a town of nearly 300 people, but Pinnaroo is over in the South Australian over the border. So it's very closely connected. We saw in COVID that having those borders closed means that the residents of Murrayville couldn't go interstate to get their fuel, which is what they had to do largely. There is a supermarket in Murrayville and there is fuel there now, but when those borders were closed and they were left without fuel, and they couldn't travel far from home, that's a pretty scary prospect. So some cross-border thinking this is a step in the right direction, and it needs to follow all legislative requirements, of course. And I did, Acting Speaker, want to spend a little bit of time talking about death, given that's the industry, the nature of the funeral industry, and we've heard several stories today about grief and organising funerals. We've heard about the member for Euroa's near-death experience after an altercation with a wombat, which has caused many a problem to her baby, to the Percy that she's carrying. And quite scary. It would be. I don't know if you've ever been. I certainly have never been attacked by a wombat, but I can't imagine it was. It was a nice experience. But my family's currently in the process of planning my Uncle Charlie's funeral, who passed away on Friday after a long battle with illness. And I thought, I've got some time. Look at that. I wasn't being brief after all. But with a few minutes left, Uncle Charlie only came into our lives 20 or 25 years ago after we discovered that my Italian grandfather, having lived here before his wife arrived, had a whole other family. But the two brothers and the sister, when we found her after adoption, were welcomed into the family and very much a large part of our family for all of my adult life, in fact. And we lost his daughter, Nerida, many years ago. And when I heard at the family wedding on Saturday that Uncle Charlie had passed away the day before, I thought, I know his daughter, Nerida, would be waiting for him with open arms and that big beaming smile of hers. And I know that they probably haven't stopped talking since. So rest in peace, Uncle Charlie. And also wanted to pay tribute to a high school friend of mine who was tragically killed in a race car accident actually a couple of weeks ago, which is tragic. But again, you see the prices, and someone that's 45 years old obviously isn't expecting something like that to occur. Regardless of which state you're in, and he was in Western Australia. But when you see the GoFundMes that come out after a tragic incident like that and the amount of money they have to raise to be able to pay tribute to their loved ones, and having to go through all of that rigmarole is, like we've heard many members on both sides today talk about, you're in such a blur at such a tragic time, and if we can at least look into and see very clearly what the costs associated are with burials, then that is a good thing. But I did want to take a moment to pay tribute to a very old friend of mine that I went to school with, like I said, tragically killed in a race car accident a couple of weeks ago. So Vale Evan, he will forever be 45.